Look around you, everyone's doing the same thing. Going to the same schools, chasing the same careers, buying the same houses, living the same lives, following the same path that millions walk before them. And they call this normal, they call this responsible, they call this just how life works. But here's what they don't tell you. That path was designed for someone else, for a different time, for different goals. And by following it, you're not finding your way, you're losing yourself completely. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this happening everywhere around him. People surrendering their individuality, their potential, their authentic selves to become part of the crowd. And he spent his life trying to wake people up to what they were sacrificing. His warning was brutal and clear. Following the crowd doesn't just limit you, it destroys you. It kills everything unique about you. It turns you into a copy of a copy of a copy, until there's nothing original left. You think you're being smart by following the proven path. You think you're being safe by doing what everyone else does. You think you're being realistic by listening to conventional wisdom. But you're wrong. You're not being smart. You're being a coward. You're not being safe. You're being destroyed. You're not being realistic. You're being programmed. Today I'm going to show you exactly why Nietzsche was right. Why the crowd is poison. Why conventional wisdom will ruin your life. And why the only way to actually live is to have the courage to walk alone. This is Nietzsche's final warning, and if you ignore it, you'll wake up one day and realize you've lived someone else's life while yours died waiting. Let's begin. The first destruction. The crowd kills your ability to think for yourself. Here's the first way the crowd destroys you, and it's the most insidious because you don't even notice it happening. When you're part of the crowd, you stop thinking. You don't realize you've stopped because you're still forming sentences and having opinions. But you're not actually thinking anymore. You're just repeating. Nietzsche saw this everywhere. People who thought they were thinking but were really just echoing what everyone around them believed, absorbing opinions from their environment like a sponge, and then defending those opinions as if they had arrived at them through careful reasoning. Think about your own beliefs right now, your political views, your career assumptions, your life goals, your moral frameworks. How many of those did you actually think through from first principles? How many did you genuinely examine and choose? And how many did you just absorb from the people around you? Be honest with yourself. Because the crowd teaches you that absorbing is the same as thinking, that having opinions is the same as reasoning, that believing what everyone else believes is somehow evidence that it's true. When you're in the crowd, dissent becomes psychologically painful. Going against the consensus feels wrong, dangerous, isolating, so you don't do it. You find ways to align your thinking with the group. You rationalize. You cherry-pick evidence that supports what everyone already believes. You dismiss anything that would require you to stand apart. And slowly, imperceptibly, you lose the capacity to think independently. You lose the ability to examine your own assumptions. You lose the courage to follow logic wherever it leads, even if it leads away from the crowd. Nietzsche called this herd mentality. And once you're in it, you can't see it from the inside. The herd feels like reality. The consensus feels like truth. The crowd's opinions feel like your own thoughts. But they're not. You're not thinking. You're conforming and calling it reason. You're absorbing and calling it analysis. You're repeating and calling it understanding. Watch what happens when you actually try to think for yourself. When you question something the crowd holds sacred. When you examine an assumption everyone around you takes for granted. The crowd's response isn't to engage with your reasoning, it's to pressure you back into conformity. They don't ask if you might be right. They ask what's wrong with you for questioning. They don't examine the logic. They question your motives. They don't consider your perspective. They signal to others that you're deviating from acceptable thought. This is how the crowd maintains itself, not through better arguments, but through social pressure, through making independent thought feel dangerous and conformity feel safe. And most people cave. They apologize. They walk it back. They find a way to align themselves with the consensus again. Because being part of the crowd feels necessary for survival. But here's what Nietzsche understood. Every time you choose conformity over independent thought, you're killing a part of yourself. You're training yourself not to think. You're becoming less you and more just a node in the collective. Do this enough times and you lose the ability to think independently entirely. You become incapable of it. Your thoughts aren't your own anymore. They're just echoes of the crowd, bouncing around in your head, and you've forgotten what your own voice even sounds like. That's the first destruction, the death of independent thought. And most people don't even notice it's happened until it's too late. The second destruction. The crowd teaches you to fear being different. Here's the second way the crowd destroys you, and this one is particularly cruel. The crowd teaches you that being different is dangerous, that standing out is bad, that the goal is to fit in, to be normal, to not draw too much attention to yourself. Nietzsche saw how this fear cripples people, how they suppress anything unique about themselves, because different means vulnerable, different means target, different means alone. Think about how this played out in your own life. Remember being a kid with weird interests, unusual talents, strange ideas? Remember what happened when you expressed them? The crowd let you know, sometimes gently and sometimes brutally, that different wasn't okay. So you learned. You learned to hide the parts of yourself that didn't fit, to suppress the thoughts that were too unusual, to pretend to care about the same things everyone else cared about, to perform normalcy even when you felt anything but normal. And you probably thought you were just growing up, just learning to be social, just adapting to reality. But what you were actually doing was murdering your authentic self to create an acceptable copy. The crowd doesn't want your uniqueness. It wants your conformity. It doesn't value what makes you different. It values how well you can mirror what everyone else is doing. This is why the crowd produces so much mediocrity, because anything exceptional is, by definition, different. And different is discouraged from the moment you're old enough to notice you don't quite fit. Your weird interests that could have become your life's work, suppressed because they weren't normal. Your unusual way of seeing things that could have become your unique perspective, hidden because it made people uncomfortable. Your authentic personality that could have been your greatest asset, buried beneath layers of learned normalcy. And the cruelest part, you did this to yourself. The crowd didn't force you. It just created an environment where being different felt so uncomfortable, so risky, so lonely, that you chose to amputate your uniqueness rather than defend it. Nietzsche would tell you that this is exactly what the crowd wants. A crowd of individuals, each one unique and different, would be chaos, unpredictable, uncontrollable, dangerous to the status quo. But a crowd where everyone has learned to suppress their differences, where everyone's trying to be the same, where no one wants to stand out, that's manageable, that's controllable, that's safe for the system even if it's death for the individual. Look at your life right now. How much of how you present yourself is authentic, and how much is performance of normalcy? How many of your interests, your opinions, your choices are actually yours versus chosen because they're acceptable to the crowd? How much of your real self have you buried because being different felt too risky? How many times have you silenced your actual thoughts to say what people wanted to hear? How often have you chosen the crowd-approved path, even when everything in you wanted something else? Every time you chose fitting in over being yourself, you destroyed a little more of who you actually are. And if you've been doing this for years or decades, there might not be much of your authentic self left. That's the second destruction, the death of your uniqueness, the murder of what made you different. And the tragedy is, you were the one who killed it, one small act of conformity at a time. The third destruction. The crowd gives you goals that were never yours. This is where the destruction gets particularly insidious. The crowd doesn't just limit what you can do. It programs you with goals and ambitions that were never actually yours. And you spend your life chasing them, thinking you're pursuing your dreams when really you're living someone else's script. Nietzsche saw this pattern constantly. People working toward goals they didn't actually want, living lives they never chose, pursuing success as defined by others while their authentic desires died unfulfilled. Think about the goals you have right now: career success, financial milestones, relationship timelines, status markers. Where did these goals come from? Did you sit down and deeply consider what would make your life meaningful? Or did you absorb these targets from the culture around you? The crowd tells you what success looks like. Make a certain amount of money, reach a certain position, own certain things, get married by a certain age, have kids on a certain timeline, retire with a certain amount saved. And you internalize these markers. You make them your own. You start measuring your life against them. You feel like a failure when you don't hit them and successful when you do. But Here's the question Nietzsche would ask. Are these actually your goals, or did the crowd just convince you they should be? Would you care about that job title if no one knew what it was? Would you want that house if you couldn't show anyone? Would you pursue that career if you couldn't tell people about it? Would you still want what you want if you had to want it completely alone? For most people, the honest answer reveals that their goals aren't actually theirs. They're performing success as defined by the crowd, chasing achievements that impress others rather than fulfill themselves. And this might be the cruelest destruction of all, because you can spend your entire life chasing crowd-approved goals, achieve them all, and still feel empty. Still feel like something's missing. Still wonder why success doesn't feel like you thought it would. That emptiness is your authentic self crying out. It's the part of you that knows you've been climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong building. You've been winning a game you never wanted to play. You've been chasing a version of success that was designed for someone else. Nietzsche would tell you to examine every goal you have and ask where it came from. Is this what you genuinely want, or is this what you've been conditioned to want? Would you pursue this if you had to do it completely alone with no one to impress? Does achieving this bring you actual fulfillment, or just temporary validation from the crowd? Because the crowd's goals are designed for the crowd, not for you. They're generic, one size fits all, designed to keep people pursuing the same things so the system keeps functioning smoothly. Your authentic goals, the things you'd pursue even if no one ever knew, the achievements that would fulfill you regardless of external validation, those are different. Probably weirder, probably less understood by others, probably harder to explain. And that's exactly why the crowd discouraged you from pursuing them. Because if everyone pursued their authentic goals instead of crowd-approved ones, the whole system would fall apart. But your life isn't about maintaining the system. It's about actually living before you die. And you can't do that while chasing goals that were programmed into you by a crowd that doesn't know you and doesn't care about your fulfillment. The fourth destruction, the crowd punishes excellence to protect mediocrity. Here's something Nietzsche saw that most people never figure out. The crowd doesn't actually want you to excel. It wants you to be good enough, competent enough, successful enough by conventional measures. But not excellent, not exceptional. Not so far above average that it makes the average uncomfortable. This seems counterintuitive because the crowd claims to celebrate success. We have awards and recognition and praise for achievement. But watch closely what actually happens when someone genuinely excels, when someone becomes truly exceptional at something. The crowd finds ways to diminish it, to explain it away, to make sure it doesn't threaten the collective self-image. If you succeed, it was luck. If you excel, you must have had advantages. If you achieve something remarkable, you probably sacrificed something more important. If you become exceptional, you must be compensating for something, or you're probably miserable despite it all. Nietzsche understood why this happens. Excellence is threatening to mediocrity. When someone in the crowd becomes genuinely exceptional, it forces everyone else to confront their own choices. It proves that more was possible, that the conventional path wasn't the only option, that playing it safe was a choice, not a necessity. And the crowd can't handle that realization, so it protects itself by finding ways to make excellence seem less desirable than it is. Think about how this plays out in your own life. When you started excelling at something, when you started standing out, what happened? Did the crowd celebrate and encourage? Or did it find subtle and not so subtle ways to pull you back toward the mean? Maybe they called you a show-off. Maybe they accused you of trying too hard. Maybe they questioned your work-life balance or suggested you were neglecting other important areas. Maybe they just made you feel uncomfortable for being too different, too successful, too visible. And probably you responded by dialing it back, by becoming a little less excellent, by hiding your ambition, by downplaying your achievements, by making yourself smaller so others would feel comfortable again. Nietzsche would say that every time you did this, you betrayed yourself to serve the crowd. You chose their comfort over your growth. You sacrificed your potential on the altar of mediocrity. The crowd maintains itself by keeping everyone at roughly the same level, not too far behind, which would be embarrassing, but definitely not too far ahead, which would be threatening. Just good enough, just successful enough by conventional standards. And if you want to be part of the crowd, you have to accept these limits. You have to suppress your drive to excel, because excellence makes others uncomfortable. You have to hide your ambition because ambition seems greedy. You have to downplay your achievements because celebrating them seems arrogant. But here's what happens when you do that. You spend your life operating at a fraction of your capacity. You never find out what you're actually capable of because finding out would require pushing beyond where the crowd is comfortable. You achieve the crowd-approved level of success and then you stop. Not because you've hit your limits, but because going further would mean leaving the crowd behind. And leaving the crowd behind feels like death when you've spent your whole life deriving your identity from being part of it. That's the fourth destruction, the death of your potential, the suppression of your drive to excel, the choice to stay mediocre because excellence is too threatening to the people around you. The fifth destruction, the crowd makes you afraid of your own power. This one runs deep, and Nietzsche spent considerable time on it. The crowd teaches you to fear your own power, to be suspicious of your own strength, to suppress your own capabilities because power is dangerous and wanting it is somehow morally wrong. Think about how you've been conditioned around power. You're supposed to be humble, not confident, modest, not proud, self-effacing, not self-assured. You're supposed to downplay your abilities, question your own judgment, and defer to the collective wisdom of the crowd. Why? Because the crowd is threatened by individuals who know their own power and aren't afraid to use it. Powerful individuals are unpredictable. They don't need the crowd's approval. They don't follow the script. They're dangerous to the status quo. So, from the earliest age, you're taught that your power is something to be ashamed of, that wanting power is greedy or corrupt, that using your power makes you domineering or arrogant, that the moral person is the humble one who doesn't assert themselves too strongly. And you internalize this. You learn to diminish yourself, to soften your presence, to qualify your statements, to apologize for taking up space, to ask permission when you should be taking action. Nietzsche called this slave morality. It's a moral framework designed by the powerless to make powerlessness seem virtuous. It reframes weakness as humility, passivity as wisdom, and self-suppression as moral superiority. And if you've absorbed this framework, you're actively preventing yourself from accessing your full power. Not because you don't have power, but because you've been taught that using it would make you a bad person. Watch how you handle situations where you could assert your power, where you could take control, make demands, refuse to accept less than you deserve. Do you step into that power, or do you shrink back? Worry about being too aggressive? Convince yourself that being accommodating is more virtuous. Every time you choose to diminish your own power to make others comfortable, you're destroying your ability to shape your own life. You're handing control to others. You're accepting less than you deserve because claiming more would require you to be powerful. And you've been taught that's wrong. Nietzsche would tell you that this fear of your own power is perhaps the most effective control mechanism the crowd has. Because when you police yourself, when you suppress your own power voluntarily, the crowd doesn't even have to do it for you. You've internalized the message so completely that you destroy your own power before anyone else has to. You make yourself weak and call it virtue. You make yourself passive and call it wisdom. You make yourself small and call it humility. But it's none of those things. It's self-betrayal. It's choosing the crowd's comfort over your own potential. It's killing your power because you've been convinced that power itself is somehow corrupt. Your power, properly understood and used, is your capacity to shape your life, to create value, to exert your will on the world. It's not evil, it's essential, and by fearing it, suppressing it, apologizing for it, you ensure you'll never be more than what the crowd allows you to be. The sixth destruction, the crowd replaces your authentic life with a performance. Here's perhaps the most tragic destruction of all. When you follow the crowd, you stop living and start performing. Your life becomes a performance of what life is supposed to look like, rather than an authentic experience of actually living. Nietzsche saw this everywhere. People performing success, performing happiness, performing fulfillment. Going through the motions of what a good life looks like according to the crowd, while their authentic self dies from neglect. Think about how much of your life is performance right now. How much of what you do is for the external appearance versus the internal experience. How many of your choices are about how they'll look to others versus how they'll feel to you? You take the job that sounds impressive when you tell people about it, rather than the work that genuinely excites you. You pursue the relationship that looks right on paper, rather than the connection that actually moves you. You buy the house that signals success, rather than the space that feels like home. You build the life that photographs well, rather than the life that actually satisfies your soul. And you do all this because the crowd has taught you that appearance matters more than experience, that what people think of your life matters more than how your life feels to live, that the performance is more important than the reality. Social media has made this worse, but the impulse was always there. The crowd wants to see the markers of a successful life: the job title, the relationship status, the material possessions, the curated experiences, and you perform them. You arrange your life to create the appearance the crowd expects. You make choices based on how they'll be perceived rather than how they'll be experienced. You live for the audience rather than for yourself. Nietzsche would ask you, if no one ever knew about your life, if you could never tell anyone about your achievements or show anyone your success, would you still want the life you're building? Would you still make the same choices? For most people, the honest answer is no, because they're not building a life they actually want. They're building a life that looks good to the crowd. They're performing success rather than experiencing it. And the tragedy is that you can perform perfectly, hit all the markers, achieve everything the crowd says you should achieve, and still feel completely empty. Because the performance doesn't fulfill you, only authentic living does. But authentic living requires courage. It requires choosing what genuinely moves you, even when it doesn't fit the script. It requires building a life that might not make sense to others, but makes complete sense to you. It requires giving up the validation that comes from performing well for the crowd. And most people can't do it. They'd rather have the crowd's approval for a life that doesn't actually fulfill them than risk the crowd's confusion or judgment by pursuing what they actually want. So they perform. They post the highlights, they share the achievements, they curate the image, and inside, they wonder why it feels so hollow, why success doesn't feel like they thought it would, why they feel like they're living someone else's life. That's the sixth destruction, the death of authentic living, the replacement of genuine experience with endless performance. And it's perhaps the cruelest destruction of all, because you can do it perfectly and still lose everything that matters. The path forward, Nietzsche's alternative to the crowd. So, here's where we are. You now understand how the crowd destroys you. It kills your ability to think independently. It teaches you to fear being different. It gives you goals that aren't yours. It punishes excellence. It makes you afraid of your own power. And it turns your life into a performance. Nietzsche's alternative isn't easy. It's actually harder than following the crowd. But it's the only way to actually live. His alternative is what he called becoming who you are. Not who the crowd says you should be. Not who you've been performing for others. Who you actually are underneath all the programming and conditioning. This starts with thinking for yourself. Actually thinking, not just having opinions. Examining every belief you hold and asking where it came from. Being willing to question everything, even the things everyone around you takes for granted. Following logic wherever it leads, even if it leads you away from the crowd. It continues with embracing what makes you different, instead of suppressing your uniqueness to fit in, protecting it fiercely. Your weird interests, your unusual perspective, your authentic personality. These aren't flaws to be hidden. They're the raw material of who you actually are. It requires discovering your own goals, not the crowd's goals, not what you're supposed to want, what you actually want, what would fulfill you even if no one ever knew about it, what you'd pursue for its own sake, not for validation or approval. It demands that you pursue excellence unapologetically. Stop dimming yourself to make others comfortable. Stop hiding your ambition. Stop downplaying your achievements. Become as excellent as you're capable of becoming, regardless of whether it threatens people. It means claiming your power. Stop being afraid of your own strength. Stop apologizing for your capabilities. Stop making yourself small. You have power. Use it. Shape your life with it. Create with it. Stop pretending weakness is virtue. And it requires you to start actually living instead of performing. Make choices based on how they'll feel, not how they'll look. Build a life that satisfies you internally, not one that impresses externally. Stop curating for an audience and start experiencing for yourself. This is hard. This means disappointing people. This means being misunderstood. This means walking alone sometimes. This means giving up the safety and comfort of the crowd. But it's the only alternative to the slow death that comes from following along. Nietzsche's final warning: you're running out of time. Let me tell you what Nietzsche would want you to understand right now. You don't have forever to figure this out. You're not going to live forever. The clock is ticking while you're reading this. And every day you spend following the crowd is a day of your actual life you'll never get back. You can keep following, keep conforming, keep performing, keep suppressing yourself, keep chasing the crowd's goals, keep playing it safe. And one day you'll be old, and you'll look back on your life, and you'll realize you never actually lived it. You performed it for an audience that didn't even care that much. You followed a script that was written for someone else. You became what the crowd wanted instead of who you actually were. And it'll be too late, because you'll have spent your life, all of it, on being someone you weren't, on pursuing goals you didn't want, on hiding what made you unique, on shrinking yourself to fit in. That's what Nietzsche was warning against. That's the destruction he saw everywhere around him. People spending their one precious life following the crowd right off the cliff. Or you can choose differently today. Right now, you can start thinking for yourself. You can start protecting your uniqueness. You can start pursuing your actual goals. You can start claiming your power. You can start actually living. It won't be easy. The crowd will push back. People will be confused. Some will be threatened. You'll feel alone sometimes, but you'll be alive. Actually alive, living your actual life, becoming who you actually are. And when you're old and looking back, you'll know that you lived, that you had the courage to be yourself, that you didn't waste your one chance following a crowd that was going nowhere you wanted to go. That's the choice: comfortable destruction with the crowd or difficult authenticity alone. Nietzsche made his choice. He walked alone. He thought for himself. He pursued his own goals. He used his power. He actually lived. And his reward? He was misunderstood during his lifetime, largely ignored, often alone. He died before anyone really grasped what he was trying to say. But his life was his. His work was authentic. His path was chosen. He became who he was instead of who the crowd wanted him to be. Now it's your turn to choose. Follow the crowd and be destroyed slowly, comfortably, acceptably. Or walk alone and actually live. The crowd is waiting to absorb you, to program you, to make you just like everyone else. But you don't have to let it. You can choose yourself, your actual self. Not the performed version, not the crowd-approved copy, the real you underneath all the conditioning. That choice is in front of you right now. Nietzsche's final warning was this: make the choice consciously. Don't drift into the crowd's destruction. Don't let it happen passively. If you're going to surrender yourself to the crowd, at least do it knowingly. At least admit that's what you're choosing. But if you're going to actually live, you need to start now, because the clock is ticking, and the crowd is always there, always waiting, always ready to absorb one more person who is too afraid to walk alone. Don't be that person. Be who you actually are. Live your actual life before it's too late.